Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that lying is physically impossible. Not against the rules. Not morally wrong. Impossible. Every sentence that leaves your mouth must be true. Every thought you choose to share comes out exactly as it actually is inside you. No white lies. No polite exaggerations. No strategic omissions disguised as honesty. Most people imagine this would be a better world. A purer world. A world finally built on honesty instead of deception. The first hour would be the easiest part. You wake up and check your phone. A friend texts asking how you slept. You type back fine and immediately your fingers refuse to send it because you actually slept terribly and the lie will not form. You type the truth instead. I barely slept because I am anxious about a conversation I am avoiding with you. Your friend reads this and has no idea how to respond because nobody has ever spoken to them this way before. By breakfast, the texture of the entire world has already changed. Every compliment you give is now a measured fact rather than a social lubricant. You cannot tell your partner their new haircut looks great if you do not actually think it does. You cannot tell a coworker that their presentation was excellent if it was merely adequate. The thousands of small kindnesses that grease the machinery of human interaction simply stop functioning because most of them were never entirely true. By mid-morning, workplaces around the world begin to collapse in slow motion. Performance reviews become brutal. Managers cannot say someone is meeting expectations if they are not. Job interviews turn into confession sessions where candidates cannot oversell their skills and interviewers cannot pretend a position has growth potential it does not have. Sales calls become almost impossible because the entire profession of sales depends on presenting a product in its most flattering light, and flattering light that exceeds the truth is no longer available. Meetings that used to take an hour now take 15 minutes because nobody can pad an answer with diplomatic vagueness. Someone asks if a project is on schedule and the honest answer is simply no, and the reasons why, stated flatly, without the usual cushioning. By afternoon, relationships are undergoing their first real test. Married couples who have spent years softening difficult truths to protect each other's feelings find themselves saying things they have never said out loud. Sometimes this brings relief. Years of unspoken resentment finally surfaces and gets addressed directly. But sometimes it brings devastation. A spouse asked if they still find their partner attractive must answer honestly even when the honest answer is complicated and would have been better left unsaid in a world where some truths serve no purpose except pain. Children, famous for asking the questions adults spend their lives avoiding, suddenly receive real answers to everything. Where do babies come from? Are you and dad going to get divorced? Did you like the picture I drew? The brutal innocence of childhood curiosity now meets the brutal honesty of an answer that cannot be softened. By evening, the legal system is experiencing a complete transformation. Witnesses cannot lie under oath, which sounds like an improvement until you realize defendants cannot lie either, removing a fundamental legal protection that exists specifically to prevent self-incrimination. Plea bargains become strange because prosecutors cannot bluff about the strength of their case and defense attorneys cannot pretend confidence they do not feel. Negotiations of every kind, which depend heavily on strategic information control, become almost unrecognizable. You cannot say you are willing to walk away from a deal if you are not actually willing to walk away. Politicians face perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. Every promise made on a campaign trail must be a promise the politician actually believes they can keep. Every claim about an opponent must be entirely accurate. Every answer to a difficult question must be the honest answer, including the parts that would normally be carefully avoided. Entire careers built on saying what audiences want to hear simply cannot exist anymore. Some politicians thrive in this environment because their actual beliefs were always defensible. Others vanish from public life entirely because the gap between what they said and what they believe turns out to have been the entire foundation of their career. By the end of the first day, something unexpected begins happening. Trust starts rebuilding itself at a pace nobody has seen in generations. When every statement is guaranteed true, people stop performing the exhausting mental labor of evaluating whether someone might be lying. Negotiations become faster because nobody is bluffing. Relationships become more efficient because nobody is managing a performance. The cognitive overhead of social interaction, the constant background calculation of who might be deceiving you and why, simply disappears. But something else disappears too. Privacy, as you currently understand it, cannot survive contact with mandatory honesty. If someone asks you a question you do not want to answer, you cannot deflect with a polite lie. Your only options become answering honestly or refusing to answer at all, and refusing to answer becomes its own kind of answer, since everyone now knows that silence in this world usually means the truth is something you would rather not say. Art and fiction face a particularly strange problem. Storytelling depends on representing things that are not literally true. If you cannot lie, can you write a novel? Can you act in a play? The distinction between a lie and a fiction, which seems obvious in your current world, becomes legally and philosophically complicated in a world where falsehood itself has become impossible rather than simply discouraged. And underneath all of this sits the most uncomfortable realization of the entire scenario. You begin to understand exactly how much of ordinary daily life depended on the small permitted dishonesties you never thought of as lies at all. The compliment that was mostly true. The excuse that was mostly reasonable. The enthusiasm that was mostly genuine. Mostly was always doing more work than you realized. And a world demanding complete honesty reveals just how much social architecture was built on that small, flexible word. The world without lies is not necessarily a worse world. In many ways, it becomes faster, more efficient, and more trustworthy than the one you currently live in. But it is not the same world. It cannot be, because so much of what currently holds human relationships together was never built on truth alone. It was built on the careful, constant, almost invisible management of what gets said and what gets left unsaid. Remove that management entirely, and you do not just remove the lies. You remove the cushion that made truth survivable.